Now, when I am dealing with academic integrity, النزاهة الأكاديمية, I have to think of who am I? I am an Egyptian. You are a man or a woman. Now, I am a woman. I am honest. I have to be trusted. I have to have integrity. What is integrity? In Arabic, since we are in a translation program, we can use an Arabic term and say integrity means nazaha. Now, what does nazaha mean? When I write, my reader has to trust me. I have to give my reader accurate information so that the reader believes in me and trusts what I say, so I will have credibility. What does credibility mean? It means that the reader will believe what I say. If I lie to the reader will not trust me. Now, if I am asked a question, who are you? If I want to answer the question, who am I? The question is not easy to answer because it depends on who is asking. If someone is asking me and this person is my boss or my superior, the answer will be different than if this person is a tourist. So, is this a simple question? No, but the purpose of the question has to be clear. What is the purpose of the question? Who am I as a researcher? All right, so if I am a teacher in the university and I am a researcher, then this question will be related to the kind of research I am interested in, the kind of research I am focusing on. And in order to have credibility, in order for people to believe me, I have to have a certain specialization. So if I am a teacher in the Faculty of Arts teaching literature, I cannot write about medicine or engineering or law. I will not have the correct information. I will need to focus on my own specialization. Now, what language am I using? Now, here we are using the English language because this is the language that you are learning. Now, if I am writing in English, I am writing to give the English reader my point of view about an issue that I am specialized in. So, using a certain language is important for your focus and your audience. When I write about a certain focus, I have to know who is going to read me. Now, I have to go through a process, and this process involves steps. What do I need to do in order to decide which language I am going to use? Now, if I am going to write, for example, about Al-Sheikh Al-Ghazali, now there are two important religious scholars with this name, one who died recently and one who is very famous in the history of Islam. Now, I have to tell my reader who I am writing about, and I have to read before I tell my reader whatever I write, because I want to be credible. Now, if I'm going to write about the recent Al-Sheikh Al-Ghazali, I have to have enough information about him in order to tell the English reader if I am writing in English. If I am writing in Arabic, I have to be careful because I need to introduce the information I have to an Arab audience. Now, who has taken part already in writing about him? I will need to find out if he is well known to the reader in English or not. And if he is well known, I have to be careful about what I say because sometimes I need to correct some misunderstandings that the non-Egyptians have. Now, who will take part in this discussion? I will consult the writers who have written about him before me, and I will consult them, but I have to mention their names and I have to mention the titles of their books or the articles that they have researched and that they have published. Now, mentioning their names and their publications will give my writing more credibility. If I do not mention their names and their books or their articles, I will be stealing their ideas. And if I do this, I will have no integrity. So academic integrity is important in research. Now, because I am a teacher, I am interested in education. And as I told you in the previous lecture, I am interested in academic integrity, in النزاهة الأكاديمية. So today's lecture is about an important teacher in the field of education, and his name is Alfred North Whitehead. He wrote a book in 1929, and the title of the book is The Aims of Education. Now, if I give you this paragraph and I pretend it is mine, I have no academic integrity. And so, of course, this is why before I start discussing the paragraph with you, I introduce the name of the writer and the name of the book from which this paragraph is taken. Now, this is an important paragraph for teachers and students. And this is a paragraph that I chose from a whole book, which means that from my point of view, this paragraph is extremely important. The paragraph starts by saying, whatever be the detail with which you cram your student, all right? So this sentence is talking to the teacher and is telling the teacher that if you fill your student's mind with a lot of details, the student will forget the details. So the sentence says, the chance of his or her meeting in afterlife exactly that detail is almost infinitesimal, meaning the details will be forgotten. All right? So do not cram the mind of your student with details. Now, even if the student does remember or does meet this piece of information, he will probably have forgotten what you taught him about it. All right? So this is an argument, a point of view about cramming the mind of the students with a lot of details. And then Whitehead suggests the solution to this problem. What should teachers do? The really useful training. So the teacher should not force the student to learn things off by heart, but the teacher should train the student. train the students to do what? To comprehend, to understand. To understand what? A few principles. So your role as a teacher is to help students in understanding a few principles, like, for example, the law of gravity. You help the student understand the law of gravity, and you do that with a thorough grounding in the way they apply to a variety of concrete details. So, if we're talking about the law of gravity, if you throw something, it will fall. It will fall if you throw it from on top of the building, or if you throw it in a minute in the classroom or in the playground. All right? So you introduce the principle to the student and you show how this principle affects his or her life. Now, in subsequent practice, men or women will have forgotten your particular details, all right? So they will not forget the law of gravity, but they will forget the details of how you showed them the law of gravity works. But this is not important. What is important is that they understand and remember the principle. Now, Whitehead says they will remember by an unconscious common sense how to apply principles to immediate circumstances. So if they throw something in the class, they do not expect whatever they throw to fly. It will remain and it will make the class dirty. Now, the following sentence, the student is addressed, not the teacher. And Whitehead tells the student, your learning is useless to you until you've lost your textbooks, burnt your lecture notes, and forgotten the minutiae with which you learned off by heart. So what is important for the student to do is to understand what they are learning, not to learn it off by heart. Because what you learn off by heart can be easily forgotten, but what you practice, as Whitehead says, will be remembered as the sun and the moon. So, the function of a university, according to Whitehead, is to enable you to shed details in favor of principles. So, do not be concerned with details, but be concerned with principles. Make these principles a mental habit, because mental cultivation is nothing else than the satisfactory way in which the mind will function when it is poked up into activity. This means that in the university, the role of the teacher and the student to help the mind to grow and to develop, to help the mind to think in a critical way, to say what the mind believes, not what other believes, because if you repeat what others believe without mentioning your name, you have no academic integrity. Ladies and gentlemen, we are still dealing with النزاهة الأكاديمية in writing, and that is academic integrity. We already discussed who I am as a researcher, as a writer, who you are as a student. We discussed Whitehead and the aims of education, and now we will discuss Zaki Naguib Mahmoud. Now, the reason why I am discussing Zaki Naguib Mahmoud, because he was a professor in the Faculty of Arts. He is one of Egypt's prominent writers, and he believed in the value of academic integrity. Now, I am going to introduce you to Zaki Naguib Mahmoud in a paragraph, all right? Because again, as we started off by saying from the very beginning of the course, that we're interested in writing paragraphs. And if we write good paragraphs, we will be able to write good essays. So Here, I am introducing you to Zaki Naguib Mahmoud, and we are going to discuss how this is linked to academic integrity. Now, he was born in 1905 and he died in 1993. He was a professor of philosophy in the Faculty of Arts, Cairo University. Now, I am giving you this introduction about him because I want you, for your homework, to choose a figure, any figure that you admire, and to conduct research on this figure and to write a paragraph about him. So Zaki Naguib Mahmoud was an intellectual who established a link between Arab tradition and modernism. All right? So first, you start by introducing who the writer is, who the speaker is, who the figure is, and introduce his main contribution to the Egyptian or the Arab culture. Now, if the main contribution is one that you have written yourself, you need to provide no source. Now, the following sentence is a source. Abbas Mahmoud al-Aqad called him the philosopher of authors and author of philosophers. So here is a citation, here is a quotation by Abbas Mahmoud al-Aqad on Zaki Naguib Mahmoud. So I am introducing the importance of using sources, using the voice of someone else, but including the name of the writer and the quotation of what the source says. So he's the philosopher of authors and the author of philosophers, according to Abbas Mahmoud al-Aqad. And of course, we all know who Abbas Mahmoud al-Aqad is. And if you don't know, write a paragraph about Abbas Mahmoud al-Aqad. Now, Zaki Naguib Mahmoud wrote many books and articles in magazines and newspapers, including Al-Ahram. In the field of philosophy, he wrote On Formal Logic in 1951, On Philosophy of Science in 1952, Towards a Scientific Philosophy in 1959. Now, all these are written in Arabic, and I translated the titles into English. So here is a list of his books, and they are all extremely important books. And of course, we need to translate them into English because they can tell the non-Egyptians a great deal of what Zaki Naguib Mahmoud believed in and what he stood for. He wrote his autobiography in 2 volumes entitled The Story of a Mind and The Story of a Heart. He also wrote about literature, With Poets in 1980, This Time and Its Culture in 1980, Shakespeare in 1943, and others. These writings clearly show that he has enriched our library. Now, I want to define academic integrity to you, and in this definition, when we define a word, we think of the term, and if this term is divided into 2 words, we have to divide the definition into 2 parts. So integrity is our starting point because it is a noun. So when we define a term that is composed of 2 words, we start with the second word, which is the noun. So what is integrity? It means adhering to moral and ethical principles, all right? Meaning to be moral and to be ethical, to be honest, and to have a sound character, means to have a good character. You have a quotation by Edward Said, who quotes Aristotle, and he quotes only one word, the word academy. Now, academic integrity, according to Tippett et al., is a commitment, and it's a commitment to 5 fundamental values. We're going to discuss these in our next lesson. Because the idea of النزاهة الأكاديمية, academic integrity, is extremely important, we are still focusing on it. Now, we're focusing on it because in Egyptian schools, students are not made aware that if you read a lesson in history, you are reading the point of view of the writer of this lesson rather than the point of view of the Egyptian society, all right? But this is changing now, because in Egyptian schools, we are starting to encourage students from a very early age to use the internet, and our children are very clever in using technology, and therefore they're starting to understand that research is important, and that when they read the ideas of someone, they have to tell the reader whose ideas there are. So, although this was not the case when I was growing up, this is the case today. Because when I was growing up, there were no computers, there was no internet, but the world has changed, and Egyptian children, even in rural areas, are using the internet very cleverly. So it's important to make everybody in the society aware that النزاهة الأكاديمية, academic integrity, is extremely important for us to understand and apply. Now, in the screen in front of you, as I showed you in our previous lecture, we have Edward Said, who is a very important Palestinian American who passed maybe a decade or so ago, and he was extremely interested in education and extremely interested in making whoever he talks to aware of the value of academic integrity. Now, I have a quotation on this slide which says that academic integrity is a commitment. It means you make an oath when you're in academia. And Tippett et al. Introduces 5 important values that have to be applied when someone is in academia and when someone has to follow this commitment. Now, a commitment means that you make an oath, that you swear that you are not going to lie or to do anything that will harm others. So, for example, the ancient Egyptians made the people swear that they are not going to pollute the water of the Nile. All right? So the people of Egypt were committed to keep the Nile clean for the present, for the generations to come. Now, academic integrity, as Tippett et al. Say, is a commitment. And they have a clause in their sentence, and the clause says, even in the face of adversity. So what does adversity mean? It means even if you have problems, even if you have no time, even if you have a difficulty and you have to produce work that you have to hand in very quickly, you cannot breach or you cannot make this serious mistake of not having integrity in academia and in your life in general. So, academic integrity is a commitment even in the face of adversity. So, it's a commitment to what? To 5 fundamental values. 5 قيم مهمة جدا علشان الواحد يلتزم بالنزاهة الأكاديمية. Now, as you listen to me, I want you to think of the translation of these words. So it's a commitment to honesty. We all know what honesty is, but I want you to think of the translation of this word in Arabic. And if you don't know the translation, go to a dictionary as an important exercise in finding the value of honesty. Now, the second value that Tippett et al. Introduce is trust. If you do not have academic integrity, your teacher will not trust you, your institution will not trust you, your students will not trust you. So trust is another important value. Fairness. We have to be just. We have to be fair in dealing with others. The fourth value is respect. We have to respect ourselves and we have to respect others. And the fifth value is responsibility. We have a responsibility to ourselves, to our colleagues, to our students, to our families, to our institution, and above all, we have a responsibility to Egypt. So, if we do not have academic integrity, we will be destroying all these values. So, let's all have an oath to academic integrity. Now, the importance of academic integrity is not only in the field of research, but the focus of today's lecture is on research and academic integrity. Now, research is not simply writing a magister, a master's degree, or a PhD, a doctorate. Research is the starting point of anything we do. Now, in our previous classes, we had a comparison and contrast paragraph about Marilyn Monroe and Princess Diana. We cannot write about this without research, without reading about it. If we want to write about the pyramids of Egypt, we cannot write about the pyramids of Egypt without research. Cairo, I showed you in a paragraph before that we cannot write about, I cannot write. I'm an Egyptian and I lived in Cairo all my life, and I cannot write about Cairo without conducting research. So when I conduct research and I read about Cairo, about Zaki Naguib Mahmoud, about Mahmoud al-Aqad, about Naguib Mahfouz, all these figures, a lot of writers have written about them. If I write about Alexandria or about Luxor and Aswan, a lot of writers have written about them. So I cannot write about these places or these people without reading about them. Now, when I read, I make use of what those writers have written. And I can make use of what these writers have written in 3 ways. I can quote directly by saying exactly what the writer says, as we did with Abbas Mahmoud al-Aqad and his quotation about Zaki Naguib Mahmoud, a direct quotation. Now, I can also mention the name of the writer in the form of a summary. I summarize what the writer said. So if a writer said something in a chapter or in a book, I can write a summary of this chapter in a sentence or two to introduce the argument of the writer. I can also cite by paraphrasing, all right? So if I have a line of poetry, for example, by Ahmed Shawqi or Hafiz Ibrahim, and I want to tell the reader in English what the writer says, I can simply introduce it in my own words, but I have to say that this is a line of poetry from Ahmed Shawqi or Hafiz Ibrahim. All right? So, in this case, when I mention the name of the writer, the title of the poem, the title of the chapter, the title of the book, I am honorable and I am following the honor code and I have academic integrity. So, research shows that writing is a process. You read and you choose from what you write what you are going to use, and you create a structure. You create a composition. You create an essay. Now, you take steps in creating the essay. You produce an introduction. You have a thesis. You introduce your argument. You have topic sentences, as you have seen in our previous lessons. So what is research? Research is a search again. Why do you conduct research? Because you found a gap in human knowledge and you want to fill this gap. Now, you conduct research in a process, in steps. You read, you write, and you read again, and you rewrite, and you correct what you've written. You improve it. When you read, you see what writers do when they write, and you try to follow their footsteps. Now, when you find a question that nobody has answered, or you find a problem and a lot of others have tried to solve the problem before you, in your research, you're going to tell the reader how those who have tried to solve the problem introduced steps, but the steps were not successful. For example, illiteracy in Egypt, محو الأمية. There are a lot of efforts that happened in Egypt to solve the problem of illiteracy, but the problem of illiteracy still remains. So you will conduct research on how did they try to solve the problem of illiteracy, but they have not succeeded. And so you're going to suggest a way to solve the problem, and you're going to tell the reader how the method you're going to use is going to succeed. So you are going to consult the research before you, and you're going to quote or summarize and paraphrase, but then you're going to introduce your own process, which is going to be a contribution to human knowledge. In this case, it's going to be a major contribution to the local Egyptian community, not a global one.